Ooh, we recording. Let me change some of the things that I was gonna say. I'm just kidding.
Again, good afternoon. Welcome to the February Wolfpack Wellness Power Lunch. I see some familiar faces, so some of you are aware of how this works. Each month, we pick a different topic and we have an expert speaker from on campus and in the larger community to come and share information with us about that topic. My favorite thing about the Power Lunch is it is not just about someone sharing information with you. It's about us learning from each other and hearing from each other. And today's session is especially special. So before I pass it off to our speaker, I see people popping in. We're going to give them a little time to join us. And I'll start by, it's Wednesday. It's the middle of the week. Um, what is one word to describe how you are feeling right now on this Wednesday? Just drop that one word in the chat. Nashia is nervous. I see some people are tired, scattered, hopeful. We all need that. Grateful, drained, content. Great. I said great, and then someone is feeling great. That's great. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. These I feel like I keep saying this every month, everywhere I am, that we are experiencing extraordinary times, challenging times, and so I always like to get a check on a pulse on how the room is feeling, our virtual room is feeling, and so for the most part, we're content, we're grateful, we're hopeful. Those of us that are tired and drained, I hope that you learned something today that helps you with some of those feelings that we're having. So we'll go ahead and get started. And as others join us, they can just pop right in. My name is Shannon Dupree. I am the Director of Wellness with Wellness and Recreation. I am excited about today's topic. In honor of Black History Month, the theme is Rest is Our Liberation. We have Nashia Whittenburg here with us, and that's Whittenburg with a U-R-G, not an E-R-G. We made an error and she corrected me. So Nashia Whittenburg is here. She's the director of the Multicultural Student Affairs here at NC State's campus. We're excited to have her here with us. But the twist on today's Power Lunch is not just about her sharing information with you. We're going to have some dialogue. And so Nashia's going to lead us in that dialogue. If at any point you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can at the end. Nashia will lead us in this discussion. I think we're going to do some breakout rooms and some other exciting things. So she'll let us know what the plan is for today. But again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being open. And all of those who shared about being drained and tired, hopefully we learned something that can change that for us all. So without any further delay, I will introduce our phenomenal speaker today, Nashia Whittenburg.
Hello, everybody. Nashia Whittenburg. That's right. It's a URG. My dad would have all the problems if we kept it as ERG because he single-handedly changed lineage and history by changing the spelling of our last name when he was in high school from ERG to URG. So I have first cousins that are ERGs, and it's a whole thing. But we're all, we're all the same family and lineage. So what we're going to discuss today, I want to give everyone a little bit of a historic context behind rest and liberation as it relates to systematically non-dominant people. And what I mean by systematically non-dominant people, it's people who have not been dominant and or are dominant because of systems that have been put in place. And we're going to touch a little bit on those systems as well. So we're really going to be thinking from a historic context and taking things that we often take for granted and that we often, just take as something that we have a freedom and a liberty to do, and understanding that those liberties and freedoms are not for everyone and that there's a historical context to that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history, and in that history, I will also share a lot about my family and our history and where we grew up and what rest and relaxation means from their perspective and that perspective. We're also going to touch on how it looks, the historical context across the United States. And it's not going to be limited to just an African American or Black person. I prefer Black person's perspective. So we'll touch a little bit on other culture as well. And as Shannon mentioned, we are going to do um, breakout rooms. We might do one or two depending on how much time we have. Please understand this is only 1 hour. So usually I teach from 6 until 8:45. So I had to condense an entire lesson in an hour. So you aren't going to know and learn everything. But what I do hope is that from today's engaging process and conversation, that you will jot down information or make note of information that you want to research further, and are willing and know that I'm an open book, and look forward to having further conversations with everyone on this call, and also with some of you individually in your own departments, with your respective teams or whatever that might look like. So, rest is our liberation is the theme for Black History Month. And rest being something that we are liberated to do does have its roots steeped in Black history and steeped in laws that have inhibited Black people from having access to rest. Then, when you talk about access, you also have to think about the financial access to rest as well. So I'm going to start off with a quote that from Audre Lorde, and it's her theories and it's her philosophy that has been a guide to our Black History Month theme. And it's also, my own mantra. And if you are not familiar with Audre Lorde, I will type her name in the chat so that you can read some of her research and books and poetry yourself. Caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation. That is an act of political warfare. Audre Lorde. This resonates so much with me personally, because during COVID, I did not personally feel liberated enough to take a vacation day until my white colleague said, okay, I need a vacation day. That is when I felt comfortable enough. And so then from there, and this was back in June, before we even got to Black History Month, I had to do a lot of thinking and research. Why is it that I feel so bad as a woman of color, taking days that I have earned as a place of vacation? What is it and what type of family and historical aspects have I had and experiences that I have had that have brought me to where I am today in 2020 then and 2021 now? So that brings us to cultural nuances regarding rest, liberation, and the big word of access. And you have to think about this from what rest means to you personally. So the question I want to pose to you now, if you could drop it in the chat, is when you think of rest, what's like the first thing that comes to your head? I'll put mine in. Reading and napping, drinks, nap, sleep, letting go and detaching. Nothing. How about vacation? Travel. There it is. I see it. Sitting down. Time for myself. Mental and physical release. Being still. Yes, I have a 4-year-old, so that um, a comfortable bed. Yes. Not thinking about work. Whew. recharging, and self-care. And so restoration, that's a yes. Be still my heart. I also think of traveling. Um, A&T Homecoming, Jiho, greatest homecoming of all time. Tai Chi. I think of beaches, sun, water, and drinks. And I'm also a winter baby, so I think of water also in the terms of snow, a cabin, and drinks. Keyword drinks. The ability to detach from responsibilities and get away from everyday stuff. So I want to start us off here. Um, Jiho is liberation. Okay, it's liberation from responsibilities. And if you are in a place where there are no phones, Jiho can liberate your whole soul, and you will need 2 weeks to recover after that. So, but I wanted to discuss, start our discussion with the history and the historic context. And I want to mention and start talking about the sundown town. Has anyone, is anyone familiar with sundown towns? I see some heads yes and some heads no. Okay, so and I'll do a quote. Colored people have to leave town by sundown. So this was very prominent during and before Jim Crow era. As a matter of fact, and a lot of people like to connect it to only and traditionally the South, but in 1714, in New Hampshire, they passed a legislative assembly passed that, and I quote, Negroes, Native Indians, or mulatto people must be home before 9 p.m. and can't leave thereafter. So I wanted to demonstrate that the idea of a sundown town was not just limited to the South. And I also wanted to inform that it was exaggerated and exacerbated with the oncoming of Jim Crow laws post the Civil War. So Jim Crow laws were exclusionary at best, and they also included an exclusionary covenants. And what those were was they basically governed who could buy or rent properties in certain areas. And it was also other racist policies. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because in a sundown town, if you were a person of color and you were caught in that town or municipality after the sun went down, you faced intimidation, oftentimes harassment by the police, and you face death threats, and in some cases, death by being a person of color in a town after the sun went down. And I also want to state that it's not just regulated to Black folks. Even during this time, in Colorado had signs that said, and I quote, no Mexicans after night. In Connecticut, whites only after dark. In Nevada, at 6 p.m., a whistle would blow, which would indicate to all natives that lived there in that particular town that it was time for them to leave. And Nevada would also expand their policy to include Japanese people. In Idaho, it was inclusive of Chinese people. And it was also inclusive of Jewish folks in parts of Connecticut and the Northeast. So this idea of a sundown town, oftentimes people like to relegate it to just Black folk, but it was inclusive of people of color. And we also like to, the South loves to own racism, like it's our thing and it's ours and nobody else can do it. But that was not the case. So this was nationwide and across the United States with sundown towns, and it was not limited to, thank you, Alan, Reconstruction era. And it was not limited by any stretch of the imagination to just Black folks. So if you want a little bit more information about the Sundown Town, I'm gonna type in the book here, which is Sundown Towns: A Hidden Dimension of American Racism. So me trying to chat in the thing is not working with the flow that I want to have. So I'm gonna get the information I want you all to have in terms of research to Shannon later so that she could kind of get that to everyone. But it was written by James W. Lowen. And so I mentioned this because if you were a person of color and you were traveling for vacation, for rest, you had to know where you could be at what time. So it was basically planning things out to a science. And so let's take for consideration, I did a tracking. So I tracked if I was a Black family or a family of color in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I wanted to go to Atlantic Beach in South Carolina. And this was during the 50s and 60s. And Atlantic Beach in South Carolina was the designated Black beach. So this was the part section of the beach that Black people from nationwide could actually go to. This was our vacation spot. This had hotels that would keep Black folks, restaurant that would feed Black folks, and leisurely activities for Black families. So if I'm coming from Knoxville, Tennessee, it would be a 6 hour and 32-minute drive, 411.4 miles. The route takes you through Asheville, North Carolina, Greenville, Columbia, Lexington, Florence, and Sherrill, South Carolina. Where are you stopping in 6 hours in any one of those counties on the route to your vacation? So, in planning vacation and rest for families of color, it brought on certain nuances of stress and fear and a want of safety for your family and your loved ones. And just as a little note today, currently Florence, South Carolina ranks as one of the top 10 counties in the state with the highest Klan population. So that's just something you kind of know even now as a person of color. And in North Carolina, a lot of folks don't know that Wrightsville Beach was also a sundown town, and also Southern Pines, North Carolina. And Southern Pines, North Carolina is a meeting place for me and my daughter to meet her godparents who live in Sherrill, South Carolina. And, it's like I just know I've been taught you leave before the sun goes down. Like even still to this day, I am not comfortable stopping in Southern Pines, North Carolina. I go one more city over before I'm comfortable enough to take my child out to meet up with our friends and families and to have something to eat or just to be in community with each other. So, and again, these were things that were taught to me, but they were also taught in lived experiences that my family actually had. My grandfather would oftentimes talk about what the travel was like from Greenville, South Carolina to Atlantic Beach. And my mother would always talk about how excited she was to go on these trips. But she remembers a time, where they were afraid because my grandfather had a nice car. I think it was like a white Impala. And so there would be harassment of people of color and of Black people traveling in nice vehicles, particularly through a town that was predominantly white and where those residents didn't have access to or the same type of cars and vehicles that were seen as a luxury that Black folks might have been driving back then. And you grow up with stories, well at least I did, of how my grandfather would run from the Klan right after work because the sun had gone down. The sad part about those stories is it would be so normal and normalized that it would be told in a laughing manner, like, yeah, I was running my ass off, was they were really after me, type of thing, because it had become normalized. And so this normalization of actually living on the outskirts and within the parameters of a sundown town and the impact that has had on our family to this day, we saw, at least I did, pop up again in November during the elections, where my parents were very pointed about saying, make sure you are in the house by a certain time, because of what happened to them in travel and in spaces. And so you think of your home and you think of when you go after work, you want to sit down, you want to be in your home, you want to be comfortable. And for a lot of people, just getting in the car leaving work is where you turn your music up, especially before you have to pick up kids and run errands, that is your safe haven. But even in that, with the mindset of, I work 3 counties over because this is the only place that would employ me, and I leaving work at 5, 6, 7 o'clock, I gotta hurry up and get home, be safe on the way so that I can get to my family. And thank you for sharing, Lisa. Cheraw, yes. Clarendon County is, yeah. Clarendon County has a lot of racism, especially Cheraw. And you also grow up where you don't want your kids to see you being disrespected. And I'm proud of my age. I just turned 44. And so I'm remembering these stories that were told and also lived in the 80s. My uncle Eugene left with the Great Migration to Detroit, and he would come from Detroit to South Carolina annually in a brand new car because he worked for GM. And he would laughingly tell us about the stops and the challenges, because it would take days for them to get here. And it would take days because I'm bringing you now to the Green Book, which every Black family that I know of had. And if they didn't have one in their home, they had a relative that had one. And my aunt, and Green Books still exist. They just are now virtual. Like, we will chat during certain times of egregious racial oppression, and we have to move in certain spaces and travel. There are groups where virtually, as people of color, we'll chat, hey, what's up with this town? Is this cool? Where should we go? Where should we avoid staying? So that concept and idea of a green book is still very lived. And just a more historic context, the Green Book was a guide for traveling Black families, and it was published from 1936 to 1966. And it was basically a book that listed services and places that were friendly to Black people, that fed and housed Black folks, and also would eventually lead to becoming a travel agency. I also want to mention the Green Book because it was actually started in New York by Victor Hugo Green, who was a mailman. And he started it during Jim Crow era, and I think the place of starting it in the Northeast, where most people, particularly people of color, identify as this place of freedom. But this piece here of acknowledging racism and how pervasive it was and how deep it was in our country and in the Northeast, and the need to establish this book that covered New York first and then expanded nationwide and became really popular in the South. And it's because of how in depth, the racism has been within our own communities. And, we look at our current situation and we talk about our Black vacation spots. And if you are a history nut like me, you travel to these locations. For me, Atlantic Beach was huge, a huge place to travel to. because that was where my parents would travel and vacation. And now when you go as a person of color, it's run down. And a lot of people think, well, it's the people who are not taking care of their town. When in actuality, when Nikki Haley was governor of South Carolina, so we're talking recent, there were policies that were put in place that prohibited access to funds and state dollars and federal dollars to Atlantic Beach unless they got rid of XY event, which brought lots of commerce and money to Myrtle Beach in the state of South Carolina. And that event is Black Biker Weekend. So in South Carolina is extremely segregated. So we're talking about the weekend before Memorial Day is White Biker Weekend. Everybody knows that. And the weekend following is Black Biker Weekend. There are laws, regulations, and they bring in police officers from other counties and other states for Black Biker Weekend, more than they do for the other weekend. And I'm not going to go too much into depth, but I am going to use this opportunity to plug February 25th. February 25th will be the day. During the day, we will show Black Beach, White Beach, which gives a historic and a current context and also a financial and legal backspace to that. Rick will be showing the film at 12, and Rick Kelly, who is the director, along with some of the prominent actors who are featured in the documentary, will be coming on later that evening at 5:30 to speak about it. If you have Amazon Prime, you can view the film now, the documentary now, for free. And that will be a part of the discussion for Black Beach, White Beach. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I wanted you to see and to understand at least my own, Top Sail was a Black beach, and so was Hilton Head Island in South Carolina. That was also Black. Um, the movie Green Book, I did not like because it did not focus on the person it should have, but it focused more on the driver as opposed to the experiences of that Black person. And so from where my family sit, we were kind of looking at the movie like, no, this is not it. And because again, it's our experience, and our experience was not reflected anywhere in that film. Um, I didn't know that. Oh, Cohan Beach in North Carolina. I gotta look that up.
Shawan.
Chowan. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. And so basically, all of these beaches, please look them up, because this is history in terms of the why and the how. And these beaches had lots of influence and money and power from the Black community that was poured into them that would make places for us to rest and relax. But understand that when you were traveling to one of those locations, you were going to meet a billboard that said, "Welcome to Clan County. Welcome to Clan Country. You are now in Clan Country." So, en route to vacation, there was a very open and overt sign that let you know where you were, let you know at what time you needed to be where, and reminded you of Jim Crow space, opportunity, and what your vacation could actually hold and what it couldn't. And yes, that's right. I did hear that Don Shirley's family wasn't happy with the film at all. A lot of people of color were not happy with that film. No, it's just that wasn't like the Nina Simone movie biopic. Well, I won't go there, but anyway, that one wasn't good either. So what I want us to do and to think about now that you have the historic context, that all of that I just told you led me up to that June date where I didn't feel comfortable taking a vacation day, where I had to second guess what did that mean and why, where I had to understand the history and the fear that came from my mother in November of 2020, the closer we got to the election, of wanting to know where we were, at what time we were where we were, whether or not we updated gun permits, and making sure that we were being safe. Um, and it all happened again for her on January 6th. Just in terms of making sure that we were in more liberal parts of North Carolina and that my sister and I were safe. And that was her biggest fear. So currently, we are in a pandemic, and that brings us to a whole other level of stress. If we were not in a pandemic, we would be eating together a good old free lunch sponsored by Wellness. I know I would be. And, we would be able to have these face to face conversations and personally exchange ideas. Even the stress of logging in for some. And quite honestly, I give every last one of you on this call and who have been continuous participants kudos because of Zoom fatigue and the fact that you're taking an interest in learning more about health and wellness, and using this platform that can cause stress over here, but flipping it for this hour as a means of relaxation and away from the everyday stuff. You really do need to be commended for that. And so we're talking about being where we are now in this pandemic. And we're also talking about access to rest and relaxation, and what that means for us when we log off. So for a lot of folks, when they log off of their Zoom call, that Zoom call is their last call. For me and other folks, with different reasons of access, I'm working my second hustle. So I'm a professor from 6 until 8:45. I have other friends who have startup businesses that they're working, as well. So even after we're done with the day stuff, we still have other jobs and responsibilities that take us well into the night. And if we think about recently what has happened with a lot of places of business, their disenfranchised and furloughed employees were the lowest wage earners in many cases. And what are they doing now? They're working multiple jobs, even if they are no longer furloughed, to make up for that time gap and for that time loss. I know for me, my brother-in-law was one that had been laid off. And so there's this additional stress of filling in the financial gap until something else happens or changes, right? And so when you add in where we are currently with our pandemic, and then the historic mindset around rest and relaxation not being all inclusive, you have to have the conversation with yourself about accessibility. You have to have the conversation with yourself about your other colleagues that you don't see on campus as it relates to what it means to be able to have an idea of an access to something, but not feel like you personally have the liberation to be able to attain that thing of rest and relaxation. Got the hours all day long. My payout would be huge if I left the university tomorrow because of a historic mindset as well as a lack of comfortability of being able to reach out to this thing that my body needs and whether or not I have access to that thing. So I don't want to go too long What I do want, oh, thank you to those dropping in the chat. But what I do want us to do, Shannon is going to put you all in some breakout rooms. And what I want you to think about in breakout rooms is if you are a supervisor or you're someone who's being supervised, I want you to think about your staff and I want you to think about yourself. And I want you to think about ways that you can incorporate rest opportunities therein for your staff. And then if you are someone who is supervised and you don't supervise others, I want you to think about what you want and what would make your work environment um, or support you in having access to rest. You know, is it that everyone goes and takes an hour, like literally close the laptop, get up and go somewhere? You know, so what is it that you need from your employer to begin to impart places and spaces of rest for you? And what are some things that you can do with your own time to be able to do that? And it could be as simple as several 15-minute breaks where you're reading something leisurely. I take multiple 7-minute breaks to do a couple fat burning exercises because when I'm doing exercises, I'm not thinking about work because I don't want to mess my face up. So that's something, you know, that I also do. So we're going to go into those breakout rooms and we're going to chat for no more than 8 minutes because I do want to have an opportunity to hear from other folks and to have this kind of exchange. So you can go ahead and split folks up.
These, never mind.
Guess we can't leave.
Thank you all. I hope you were able to generate some solid, I know we were very limited with time, but at least exchange some sort of solid ideas. And again, I will say, just share some of the things that I do. I'm reading a fictional book, Children of Blood and Bone, which I love, by Tomi Allende. And I alternate days. So I'll take 2 15-minute breaks to read from that book only and just chill out with my blanket and my couch. And then on the other days, that's when I do the 3 7-minute, workouts to kind of take care of myself. And even if it's cold, just go outside and actually do some of my workouts. And those are just things that during the day I also do, and also make sure for my staff, since the Black History Month theme is rest is our liberation, that they take opportunity during the day to rest. Like I literally, want to be able to text them and they not respond for an hour because they are taking the time that they need, to rest. So we have about 10 minutes. And so this can be an open conversation forum where you can drop things in the chat or just take yourself off mute and kind of go from there. Or any questions.
Nasha, one of the things that I brought up in our group is just how, and I feel like how this has really shifted for me a lot in the past probably 3 years or so. But I work over and was in counseling, but prevention now, and we do a lot of programming as the community centers do around different topics. And so often we get a call for specifically for staff of color to be present at an event or present at an event, particularly Black staff in the past year. And one of the things that we were talking about is that wanting is an expectation that if our staff, if we have a Black staff member who goes and presents about racial trauma, that they're not coming back into the office and having to see a student right after that, that they take the time, that it is emotional labor, it is beyond. And so being able to create space for that, and a big part of that I've seen is the white accountability piece of this. And so reaching out to our staff to say, anyone can do a stress management program. There are 60 of us, but we all, there are only certain people who can be a Black person and go into a space where Black students would like to see a Black person. So that means the other white staff has to step in and do the work so that frees up other people, so that it's not just this thing of like, here's another opportunity and we call these 3 people, but that there's actually space and support around that. And that, the white staff are then doing like the backup work or other things like that to create those spaces. So that has felt like a really important shift to me as a supervisor.
That's good that you share that. I know I have an expectation in my office. If there was a challenge that came up that was reflective from one of our cultural or ethnic communities, that it was someone else that shouldered that responsibility, and not one of us. If it were about Black women, I expected one of my other staff members to kind of come in and have that conversation. And Latinx women, same thing. One of us, another person would step in and have those conversations. Because we, like you all, get asked a lot for people of color, and oftentimes it leads to tokenization. And so I have a deeper conversation before I commit myself or anyone else to anything with the why are you asking? I think how you framed it in terms of representation, because representation matters when it's students of color who want to see and learn from someone of color. That's completely different from the typical tokenization request that we get when they just want to talk about diversity, but have like one Black or brown person on the panel, not because of what they would add to the conversation, but just to kind of like save face. And that is exhausting, especially, it was really exhausting when I first got here because I wasn't asking those questions first. And I also didn't have the support to be able to say no. Well, now I do have the support in terms of that relationship with my supervisor and the expectations within OIED to be able to very comfortably say no. And, I love Sherry because she allows that opportunity, say no, and then, let me know what's up. she will have your back on that. And I'm glad you mentioned that because it's definitely something to think about, everyone on the call to think about and consider. And that when we are in those spaces and we are talking about our own personal trauma, that we need a minute. I spoke a lot about my family and up to recently. So post this call at 1:30, I'm really gonna log off and shut down for a minute, go and run an errand, go work on my mom cave or do something just to kind of bring myself back before this 2:30 meeting that I have. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Anyone else?
I'm Corey. I work in the study abroad office as the Assistant Director for Strategic Marketing, Diversity, and Inclusion, and I love Nashia. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here. But one of the things that I've learned growing up, so I am a corporate kid. Like I worked in business before I worked in higher ed. And as a Black African American female, I was taught you come before 8 o'clock or before whenever your start day, you get there early. You don't leave till everybody else around you leave.
Right.
You have to prove yourself, you have to show, you have to work. So taking days off, even if you have them, is also really not a thing because you can't necessarily do that because you're having to prove yourself. And so one of the things that I've shifted as I've been in higher ed is I'm taking all my days, unless I have reserve because I want to do something else with them later. But this year I'm implementing wellness days for myself. I don't need to have 102-degree fever to have a wellness day. If I'm mentally, emotionally exhausted, before I get exhausted, if I'm tired, I need to take a wellness day. I need to learn to prioritize myself and my health, all areas of it, and not just if I have an outlying circumstance that someone else would understand. And so that's how I'm showing up for myself and taking that time to literally rest and not moving it or not giving myself an out for it. Because if I can't show up for myself, how am I going to show up for all the students, faculty, and staff that we're here to serve?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Corey. I also wanted to acknowledge Alyssa Dodds and what she put in the chat, because especially the part about the calendar, use your calendar. I will intentionally put 15 minutes of block time between meetings. I refuse to now go back to back to back with meetings. I flat out refuse to do it. And I make sure I eat when it is that I'm supposed to, and not because I'm forced into this time period to be able to do that. And going back to Corey, I wanted to thank you for bringing in the historic context of how we were raised as Black women, in that, both of my parents, my father was first Black corporate exec. My mother was the first secretary hired for the school district where we're from. And I was raised, you get there first, you leave last. You take a break in your office, but understand doing what everybody else does not make you equal. Like, you can't do that. And to get ahead, you have to do more than. And that has just really and truly been that mentality that pounds out rest for women of color, And I also think about all of us as women, period, with rest and how we're managing being mothers. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a Zoom call with a colleague who's male and identifies all of their children, but they're never interrupted. But every single time I am on a meeting with one of my women identified colleagues, you will constantly have the kids coming in and out of the picture. So, not only is our rest interrupted, but also our work in that process and in that space. And so that's why it's very important that, we begin to find ways, even small ways, to liberate ourselves and to pour back into ourselves. Because if we don't do that, we cannot be the best mother, we can't be the best employer, we can't be the best supervisor, the sister, the daughter, father, or whatever may it be. Even if it's to play whatever your favorite music is from Alexa or your cell phone, we've got to begin to find small ways. Not everybody can take huge chunks of time. Not everybody can take, at this time, I don't have a staff. Like, I'm going to be hiring an administrative assistant next week and going into a search for 3 assistant directors over the coming months. So I am now not at liberty to be able to take a true realized vacation. So it's even more important and inherent that I take those small liberties during the day. And it helps. It really does help a lot. Thank you, Alan, for the 15 minutes earlier. Yeah, having to talk, and also the Black tax. And thank you, Lisa, for recognizing what that is and bringing that to the surface. 150% to 75 or 50. And that, you
And
know,
that's from
that
childhood. I mean, that you got to do that much better than a white person to get it even recognized. I mean, of course, I kind of fight that and have been all my life. Like, I mean, part of my French, but I'm not going to live. But it's something that we think about. I worked for architecture, and it's real quick. It was a young white young lady who said something, and me and the two black dudes looked at each other like, "Man, are you kidding me? If we would have said that, are you?" Well, I mean, so, and I'm grown. I mean, I'm almost 50 years old, but these are things. I'll take it back to recent. When I watched the video of George Floyd, I would have done all the same things he would have. So that being said, he lives. He's not my age. I don't know that man. But as I watched each one of those videos, everything he did, I knew about. I mean, I would have done the same thing. So it's about resting. I mean, you know, so just keep that in mind that this is not just some one-off, one family. What she said, you know, is something that I'm from DC. I always wonder why my stepdad never wanted. He loved to travel now, all over the world, but never traveled interstate. He grew up he was born in the 30s. You know, he was in college. He was a brown skin guy, but at that time it didn't matter if you were white looking or black. So his whole goal and his whole life was to prove the white man wrong. He learned how to speak German. He went skiing. He's telling all these stories, but just this has been something that's been going on forever. I mean, it needs to, hopefully it's going to stop. It's stopping. And people understand, put yourself in other people's shoes. So,
I think
you
you
know,
bring
with that,
up
I'll leave with some love. You know, it's all good. But it's a
I
lot.
did want to acknowledge, and I think because I think you bring up a very valid point as to the reason why so many, I know, Black women were hurt with the recent case of Breonna Taylor, because she was in her house resting. And there are numerous cases. There are more than one Breonna Taylor. That's the one that we know about and that received the most publicity. But even in our space, our own homes and places of rest, our lives can be taken. And I think that also adds to the Black psychology and the Black tax of what it means for us to be liberated enough in order to take time to take care of ourselves. And I also wanted to go back to the chat really quick and then close out. Um, if you aren't taking, before I was not taking breaks during the day, and I would be empty by the time at the end of the day with my child. And I found myself in a space of not being a good parent. And for me, you know, incorporating therapy in my day, that's something that is a must, but it's also not a part of rest. You know, this is how I am taking care of myself in order to be a good employee. And, you know, those are the types of liberties and in that thought process of being liberated enough that we need to do for ourselves. And I wanted to end by thanking everyone again for coming. Through Zoom fatigue, you know, you still found time to use this same forum as a means of rest and learning for yourselves. So I appreciate you for the timing for being here. And please reach out to me anytime about conversations. I'm an open book, literally. And thank you so much, Shannon, for the opportunity to be here with everyone today. And thank you, Shannon, for opening up these conversations, these very real conversations, so that we can teach from our experiences and also learn from others. Thank you.
Thank you, Nashia, for this important discussion today. Thank you, everyone, for attending. As always, we will follow up and send everyone. She mentioned some great research and resources and books and other things We will try to capture as much as we can from her and send that out via email, including the recording from today. If there are any questions, please let us know. Save the date, March 10th, Nutrition Month. We'll be having a discussion about healthy eating. There is no one size fits all. We'll be sharing recipes, so join us next month with registered dietitian Lauren Smith. Again, have a great day. And I'd like to leave you with a reminder, before you can show up for anyone else, you have to first show up for yourself. So I hope each and every one of you shows up for yourself today and moving forward. Have a great one.
And Shannon, can you hang back for a second?